Hello everyone, I'm Silent Death, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, Science Harder Campaign. We are starting off today with another Kerbal operating system launch. Our payload is a stripped down version of the dress probes. It doesn't have quite as much of the expensive sizeometers or accelerometers or whatever you want to call them. And it has a little bit less fuel, well, a lot less fuel, because it does not need to go as far. We're going to be launching this one towards the moon and using that to test out some scripts. This will not be the first one we're going to test. We're going to use the probe that we launched last episode for our initial test. This one is going to be for more complete tests because it is closer to the actual dress probes and is capable of re-entry, unlike the probe that we launched last episode. I fully expect the probe we launched last episode to be destroyed at some point during our test, and I do not want to waste the money. Even stripped down, this probe cost 41,000 Kerbal bucks, so it's still going to hurt if we do destroy it. And the previous probe was at least able to pay for itself by doing a satellite contract, which I'm not going to do with this probe because I want it to be closer to what the actual dress probe is going to be going through. After Dietrich drops off his cargo, he has to again re-enter the long-sat lifter, this plane, still having a bit of teething problems during re-entry, even though this is several missions after it's been created. But it's basically a lot of compromises in this design due to our tech level. But Dudrik seems to be doing okay. He's well acquainted with things not going right. Things always seem to fail when he is the pilot, which is why we put him on these challenging designs. He's coming in for a somewhat atypical approach, about 10,000 kilometers, not 10,000 kilometers, but 10 kilometers above where I normally cross over the mountains, and then dropping down really quick just to make things go a little bit faster because I was not being particularly patient. And we do have air brakes on this, so we can use those to slow down. We also have parachutes, of course, and a fair amount of drag since we are slowing down fairly quickly from just the drag without having to use the brakes. Gear down, brakes, toggled for a little bit there, a little bit more braking, and some little weird graphical glitch with the shadow type thing. I don't know what the deal is with that. And we forgot to use the parachutes. Well, there they went. Speaking of the dress probes, they are both on their way out of Kerbin's sphere of influence. The Minmus base is also ready to do its burn. It's a very long burn. We waited until it could get an intercept at its ascending node, just so that we wouldn't have to do a plane change. And with the amount of fuel that it has, it was quite a long burn, which of course threw off the maneuver node a little bit, a lot, and causes us to waste probably about as much fuel as it would have taken to do the burn at another point. And dropping off the extra fuel tank, the empty fuel tank from our refueling attempt, which gives us a fairly decent intercept. Now we will do some chaos testing with our chaos probe here. We already have it approaching the moon, about to enter the sphere of influence. The first thing we're going to have to program is the capture burn, which brings us to kind of our first choice here. We need to decide how we're going to do that capture burn. One way we could do it is just like you would normally do, burn at your periapsis as you enter until you get the other side down to the altitude you want, and then go around to the other side and circularize your orbit. However, that tends to mean that you don't have an orbit that is on the equator. And we do want to land right on the equator so that when we take off, we will have an equatorial orbit, which will make the transfer burn a lot easier. The other way we could do it is to kind of adjust the inclination of our orbit right as we enter or at the periapsis, and then do the circularization after we have adjusted the orbit, and potentially land that way. That would make landing a lot easier. If we do it the first way, where we have an inclined orbit, we're only going to cross over the equator at 1 point, or well, 2 points on the front and back. And we're going to have to detect basically which one of those is going to be in daylight and where we need to burn so that when we actually land, we're going to be on the equator. Whereas if we did it where we change the plane of the orbit and then circularize, we could pretty much land anywhere in the light side, and we would definitely be on the equator. The first option with the inclined orbit will be the most fuel efficient, but the hardest to program. And the second one would, of course, be the least fuel efficient and the easiest to program. But I'm not certain that I have enough fuel to do it the easy way. So we're going to try the hard way and see how actually difficult it turns out to be. If it turns out to be too terribly difficult, what we can do as sort of a plan B is just have the craft land on the surface and not worry about coming back. Presumably, Dress will pass within communication range of Kerbal at some point in its orbit. It should, at least. Or at least in communication range of one of the other planets. They can bounce a signal back to Kerbal, and we can transmit the science data, at least enough to achieve the Explorer Dress mission. So that is our plan B. But first, let's look at the scripts that we have. We are breaking things up into multiple scripts, with one main script that's going to be kind of the big picture script. At least that's how I'm planning to do it. I've recently learned, like a couple of hours ago, that the game does not save scripts running if you leave the vessel and then come back, which I had thought it did. So we may have to rethink this whole idea. That, or we'll just have to stay focused on the vessel pretty much the whole entire time until it, from changing the sphere of influence all the way until it takes off again and waits to do its transfer burn. Which, being that we have two of them coming at the same time, is not really likely. But this is the decision tree, or the beginnings of the decision tree. First thing, we're going to be waiting for the sphere of influence transition. Tell us how long that is. So until the ship body, so the body the ship is orbiting, is the moon, then tell us how long we still have to wait, and wait a little bit. And when that is done, we have entered the moon's sphere of influence, and then it's going to run another script called capture. And this capture script is responsible for doing the circularization burn. It has a declare parameter, which is the desired altitude. The parameter is this number here, in parentheses. So that is our desired altitude. And instead of kind of placing a node like you would do it manually and adjusting the prograde and retrograde stuff until you get the desired orbit, what we do instead is we calculate how fast we should be going, and then we set up a maneuver node for that particular velocity. So to do that, the equation for our orbital speed at a given point is velocity equals the square root of g times the mass of the body. All that times this little part inside brackets here, which is 2 divided by your distance from the center of the body, so radius plus altitude above the surface, minus 1 divided by the semi-major axis. And the semi-major axis is just the average of your apoapsis and your periapsis. So what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, as soon as we enter, look at what our ship periapsis is, set that as one end of our orbit, and then set the other end of our orbit as the desired altitude, and set that to our semi-major axis. Then calculate velocity for that equation, or that type of orbit, with one end at our periapsis and the other end at our desired altitude. So it does that, prints out that stuff, and then it creates a node. It puts the node right at our periapsis, and it sets the velocity to the velocity of what we calculated, minus the velocity that the ship will be going at its periapsis, which is what all this big long thing is. Just say the velocity of the ship at time plus time to periapsis, and we want the orbital velocity, and we want the absolute magnitude of the velocity and not its components. And then we'll add that maneuver node to the orbit thingy. Then it runs another script called ExecuteNode, which we'll go back to. Turns on SAS because ExecuteNode presumably will turn it off. Then after this has been ran, we've completed this node. And what we should do here is probably remove this node, which I can come back and do it. I think it's just new node : remove, or maybe just remove a new node, one of those two. But I'll remove that just to make sure that doesn't get in the way. Now we calculate another orbit with the semi-major axis set to a circular orbit of desired altitude plus r. So we're basically saying we want to be going in a circular orbit. Then it will tell us what that is going to be by printing the velocity, which forces this to recalculate. And that'll again recalculate using this equation. Actually, this equation. And more printing of stuff out. Then we do another node. It's basically at the same thing. We're also going to be burning at a periapsis. We're assuming that the orbit, the periapsis that we enter at, is going to be above where we want this desired altitude. But it should still work even if it's below. It'll just be a little bit inefficient in terms of how many times you have to orbit waiting to burn. And this is pretty much exactly the same thing as you have up here. And then it also executes the node again. And the execute node script is what is taking this episode so long. I have been working on this for days and days and days. First thing, we have a big long thing, and they're broke into these little states right here. From 0 all the way down to 5. But we're skipping 1 because that is something that I changed my mind about how to do. And then our finished state is -1, which is basically stop the script and go back to whatever called it. So this first part here is just a check to make sure that if we call the script and we don't have any fuel left, it automatically exits the script. So if the stage number is 0, we're in the last stage, and if we don't have any liquid fuel left, no need to check both liquid fuel and oxidizer, but if we don't have any liquid fuel left, then just exit the script. This one here is to deal with a bug. Particularly when you're launching things up from space planes and single-stage orbit such craft, where they've been cargo, and when you stage them out, you don't also ignite the engine. This chaos scripting language has a very difficult time detecting the fuel in the bottom stage because the engine is not activated. And what it tries to do, it will try to stage past that engine. So this warns you about that problem. And you can basically just use the little plus sign to add a stage below the bottom stage. And that will tend to fix this. So it gives you about 10 seconds, well exactly 10 seconds to do that. And then it stages. And then it waits a second and moves on to the next part. And this part is the hard part. I could have done something that's a lot like the counter in the game, where it just tells you how long it's going to take you to burn based on your current stage. But as we all know, that is frequently useless. We need something far more accurate if we're going to be doing interplanetary burns. Particularly, we need something that takes into account burns across multiple stages. The scripting language is not particularly good at doing things across stages, and there's still in fact some issues with what I have so far, but I got it to mostly work. So here, we're setting up a bunch of lists that contains the mass of each stage after you've kind of staged, the fuel mass, the total thrust for all the engines in a stage, the average ISP, or the ISP for all the engines in the stage, using the ISP formula, and the delta V for a stage. So first we have to go through all the parts and see. So this whole little thing is for all the parts. We're just looping through them. And then it calculates the mass, the fuel mass, Well, that's actually done in 2 parts, but this is the first part. And then it's got to calculate how much the fuel weighs. So that part is down here. So what this is up here. This ends up being the dry mass. And it'll be later be the fuel mass after we've done some calculations down below. This just makes it the dry mass. So resource amount, the amount of either liquid fuel or oxidizer, times the conversion factor from the amount to weight. It's like 5 kilograms per liter or something like that. I forget what the units are, but it's 5 kilograms per something, per whatever unit the game uses. Then we also have to calculate the engines. We're checking the ISP of the engines here. If the engine is off, the script will return an ISP of 0. So we've got to turn the engine on if it's not one that's activated. And then if it's had to be turned on, we turn it back off. So we don't have weird engines doing. And this whole check here is if the engine is on and the engine is in the current stage, or less than the current stage. This means engines that you have manually turned on, or the engine stage equals the current stage, which is kind of things that stays normally, and these are things that you have turned on manually by right-clicking them. And this is just an extra little check for kind of the bug that we talked about up above, where it has problems recognizing the very bottom stage. Okay, so that is that. We're calculating the average ISP here and here. So up here it's max thrust of the engine times the thrust limit, which is a percentage, but not a decimal percentage, a whole number percentage, like 99% instead of 0.99. So we also have to divide that again by 100. And then we have the engine ISP here, and we're just totaling those up. Then we get the total thrust. And down here, we finish the calculation on the average ISP just by dividing the total thrust by the average ISP up here. And that gives us, we also set our total thrust for the stage and the engine ISP for the stage. Print that out, we move on to the next part. Here's where the extra mass calculations are done. So how much the fuel weighs is going to be the wet mass minus the dry mass. And then we're going through, since up here we've only calculated how much weight is in each individual stage, we need to start calculating how much weight, how much the ship will weigh after it stages, which is this little part here. So if not current stage equals stage number, if not, we're at the current stage that the ship is at, which returns this. Then we can just say the mass of a stage is going to be the current ship mass minus the mass of the earlier stage. And then here, if this is the bottom stage, just set that ship mass, or set the stage mass to the ship mass. That is all that little check is doing. And then we calculate the delta V, which is a pretty standard formula. ISP times the natural log of, I think it's wet mass divided by dry mass times 9.82. I don't know why the game uses 9.82 instead of 9.81, but it does. Print out all that stuff. And then we move on to the next step. In this part, we've done all of our stage calculations. We need to find out how long we need to burn, and that's what this whole little section is for. Just a little bit of printing out here, so we're trying to calculate the burn time. So the burn delta V is being set to the maneuver node delta V, and then this little section here will run until either we don't have any delta V left or we run out of stages. So basically, if there's engines in this stage and it has some kind of fuel, we set the initial mass to the stage mass. Then we set the stage end mass to some function that I'm really not going to try. Well, I guess, it's e raised to the delta V divided by, actually e raised to the negative delta V divided by 9.82 times the ISP. And all that is raised to e, and then that's multiplied by the mass, m0, the wet mass. And that gives us the end mass for a given delta V. We're calculating how much delta V of the stage mass we're doing is here. You'll see this several places throughout here. But this is saying, give me the minimum of the burn delta V divided by the stage delta V. So it's basically saying from 0% to 100%, but don't go above 100%. And multiply that times the stage delta V. So if the stage delta V is greater than the burn delta V, you'll get a number that's smaller than 1, and that'll be a percentage of the stage delta V. And if it's less than the burn delta V, you'll get a number that's bigger than 1, which will drop down to 1. It'll just say use up all the stage delta V. Then it starts calculating the average acceleration, which is important to know so that we know how long we have to burn. And it adds that to the total burn time. So burn time equals burn time plus the stage delta V, or how much of the stage delta V we're going to use, divided by the average acceleration. And then up in printing out, then we subtract how much we're going to burn. We actually subtract the entire stage's delta V instead of doing this calculation, because if we have more delta V in the stage than we need to, this will just drop negative and trigger this condition. So we don't really care that it's exact or not. Then at the end of this, we turn SAS on, and we drop down to the next state. This loops through all the stages until we burn enough or run out of stages. I believe I already said that, but I'm just making that clear. So this is the wait for burn thing. Pretty small little section here. So until the maneuver node ETA, we're basically saying here, until we're 30 seconds before we need to burn. That's all this is saying. And if SAS is on, turn SAS off. We have to toggle SAS sometimes to make sure that the thing knows it can steer. It doesn't always do that correctly. Then it just prints out this waiting to burn number and rounds that so it's waiting to burn for a given number of seconds. And while we're waiting to burn, we point the craft towards the sun so that we don't have to worry about running out of power. Then once we get within 30 seconds that we need to burn, we have a little extra check here, set warp to 0. Basically means stop warping if we are warping. Just in case for some reason we have not set up our alarm clock with enough advance for it to move around. Then we unlock the steering from pointing at the moon, or the sun I mean. This controls the staging. Just if we run out of fuel in a stage, it will stage to the next stage. This is the actual burn part. So we lock the steering to the maneuver node direction. And until Wait until we actually have to start burning, which is that little part. And it continues printing out the wait time, which is pretty much exactly the same up here. Just waiting a little bit longer, but we're in the next part here. So basically we waited until 30 seconds before the burn, and then we pointed the maneuver node. And then we wait until we actually have to burn. So that gives us 30 seconds to actually point at the node. This part is the actual burn part. So it's burning, it tells us how long or how much delta V we have left to burn. Then it locks the throttle to the minimum of 1 R, the delta V we need to burn, divided by the ship's acceleration. And KSP just crashed. Which is happening a lot with Chaos, because there is a pretty major memory leak in the program, in the script add-on thing. A major headache. Hopefully they'll fix it for the next version. But yeah, what I was saying. So the average acceleration, or not the average acceleration, the instantaneous acceleration, is the ship's max thrust divided by the ship's mass. Dividing that by, or dividing the delta V by that, gives us a time. Or not a time, but, well, yes, a time. It's basically is locking the acceleration. How to say this? Delta V divided by acceleration. When we start getting towards the end, the ship will start throttling down, so that we're basically doing the remaining delta V per second. And I may change this little part here. Instead of doing the ship's acceleration, I may do it. See, right here it is meters per second, but I can change that to do meters per second per physics update by checking how long it takes for this to run. And that would have a little bit more accuracy. I'm not sure if I need to or not. Right here, you can see the precision of this. It'll only get to, it gets to 0.1, which is the closest it'll get. I could say 0.01 if I wanted to, but I'm hoping this will be close enough. I may make it a little bit more accurate if I change this too. And if that is done, or if we're out of engines, set the throttle to 0 and stop holding the throttle. And this is also a check to see if we are done. So if we only have 0.1 left to burn, or if we're out of fuel, section is the out of fuel section. If stage equals 0 and we have no liquid fuel left, then set the stage to the escape stage and the script will exit. And that'll fall back to the capture thing right here and right here, which is why we need to remove the node right here, because it'll still have the 0.01 left, or 0.1 left. That was a lot. So let's actually see this in action. Okay, we are at our test bed, our chaos test bed. See over here, another one of the problems that I've been having with the chaos scripting thing is if your root node is at a different orientation than your controlling point, controlling module, command module thing, the steering just gets all messed up and tries to spin around and do derpy stuff. It's also a problem with this flight computer too, the RemoteTech flight computer, so I guess they share that same issue. To fix that, we had the heat shield being the root part because it was attached to, or a decoupler was attached to it that was attached to the space plane that lifted this. So it just threw off the heat shield, decoupled it, and then thankfully, the probe core switched to being the root part, and things work properly now. But we're going to run our main moon script, which tells us we have a little bit of time until the SOI transition. Might want to round that down to a whole number. $100, and it should cut out right about at 60. There we go. We can delete that alarm, and we'll just speed up a little bit more. The boom transition tends to be pretty accurate. And now then it is calculating the maneuver node for capture burn, which it has done. It puts our periapsis right at 20 kilometers, exactly where we want it. And it's right there. It is now calculating the various ISPs. And it's telling us how long we have to burn. And doing the whole wait thing, pointing itself towards the sun. So it had gone through, calculated all the various stage thrust things. Apparently it didn't have to do very much math because it's all going to be done by one stage, thankfully. Which is an hour and change away. Could be an issue, but not too much of one, I don't think. So let's just fast forward through that. Okay, we're about to switch over towards the second part, moving away from looking at the moon to looking at the maneuver node, which apparently was not that big of a deal. Now then, we will be burning. There we go. Looks like it agrees with Kerbal Engineer in the burn time. One good thing about having a script do this is we can easily fast forward. There is why I kind of need to change how the maneuver node is throttling. A little bit of trouble getting it right on there. But it did, and it's going through and doing the other burn. We're at 20.2 kilometers. Pretty close to the 20 kilometers that we wanted. The other end is going to be at 19.7. So it will be an average of 20 kilometers. Since that is what we set the semi-major axis as. We're back to pointing towards the sun, so we can fast forward a little bit more. And this is not a very long burn. Looks like we also have enough fuel in this stage, so we won't need to stage. At least I don't think so. We'll fast for a little bit more. Just going to need to turn a little bit more this time. Switching over to looking at the node. I think 30 seconds is still long enough for something this size. If we're going to use a script for something bigger, we probably need to make that a little bit longer. But I'm probably not going to use this for something bigger because of the memory leak. Not much of a burn here. Having trouble getting that tiny little bit. Maybe I should make it 0.2 or something, or just change how the engine throttles down. But it did finish. The program has ended. We are now in a 20.2 kilometer by 19.6 kilometer. Pretty good when we asked for an even 20 kilometer. Close enough. that's all the tests we're going to be doing for this, but some alarms are coming up and have come up, and we need to go check them out. So let's hop over to the Minmus base. Due to this episode already being pretty long and delayed, we're just going to do a capture burn for the Minmus base and not land it or do anything else with it this episode. We will come back to it next episode and start setting that up. The last of our Duna Fleet correction burns, the dynamic Dunos correction burn, is up and running. Just the tiniest little bit of a burn. Just going to do some RCS. Hardly anything at all. Let's see what that looks like. Not quite as good as we want. Let's see. I can't remember what keys are what. It's a little bit low. Somewhere around in here, I think. Gotta find controls. That's probably around where we're going to want it. At least I think it is. We'll find out. The last thing I want to accomplish this episode is landing the base race and getting the B team home with all their lovely experience. Hopefully in a single piece. And, you know, still alive would be nice. And this orbit should do it. We have a periapsis of down to 43K. Going to hold prograde, surface prograde. Because I don't want to be landing in the darkness. I want to land on the light side so that I have power for my SAS as much as possible. And also so I don't drain the SAS trying to hold. At least I think I'm going to land today. Yeah, we are. Hopefully our temperature, let's keep an eye on that. Hopefully that stays acceptable. Okay, our apoapsis is down below the atmosphere, so we are definitely going to land. Periapsis is... we've already passed it. So we're going to go up. We should possibly be landing in the daylight now. I think we may want to start angling up here in a little bit to slow ourselves down. Yeah, now would be a good idea for that. So we will... let's let us go into the daylight before we do that. We'll just hold this for a little bit longer. Assuming we will get into daylight, we should be close. I would think. Electric charge is running out. Okay, we're definitely going to want to point up now. No, we still got a long ways to go before we get to daylight. So we will try holding something like this. And that is not going to work, is it? Nope, not at all. Okay. We'll hold retrograde then if you can. At least the engines can take more. Well, that wasn't good. There goes all of our power. And that was all the pilot stuff too? Okay. At least we have a whole lot of resistance. Drag, I should say. Now it's going to try to hold up. Okay, yeah, that's fine. That works, actually. Slow us right down so that we don't get any heat stuff going on. Works for me. Just fast forward through this. Don't care about the electric charge anymore. As long as people don't die from lack of electricity. And now we're plummeting, which is quite excellent. Everyone should get down safely. We've crossed through the dangerous part, and we only lost the little tug we had built. How much life support do you have? Okay, you're not bad off there. Plenty of life support. I don't know what these are set as. Toggle info. Deployment altitude. Where's the deployment altitude? Okay, so I don't want to pop them too early. I don't think. We should have plenty of chutes to slow us down. And we're holding nice and actually leveling everything, which is unusual. Not what I was expecting. Actually slowing down pretty well on our own. I was quite concerned that this was going to destroy itself. Okay, parachutes. Big, giant, humongous parachutes. Humongous. Okay, I'm going to try to cut the ones in the back so that things level out a little bit. And let's see if that makes us land a little bit flatter. Does seem to be helping. Yeah, that's quite good. Okay, 500 meters. What's the speed? Oh yeah, we're going quite slow. Perfect landing. I think I probably miscounted how many chutes I had when I was setting up the real chutes thing, and that's why I was going the wrong way. Okay. Y'all hold on, B-team. That was loud. Let's recover this and see what we've gained. 41.6k back. 81% of that. And 17 experience. 17 experience. Patcock did not get any experience. Pafail, why did y'all not get any experience? Do you have to be in the cockpit to get experience? That doesn't make any sense. Something is wrong there. They should have gotten experience. But Toys and Grumph are the ones that matter most. And they, of course, did get their experience. I'm guessing the crew cabins and those things must have had a problem or something. Or maybe it's because they didn't get out on Minmus? No, they should still get experience from orbiting and stuff. So I have no idea why they didn't get experience there. We'll have to deal with that at some point. But we'll set up alarms for these people's downtimes. And probably send these guys off maybe to Eve. What is our next transfer window? Carbon to Eve in 86 days. Maybe not to Eve then. I don't think we'll have the science we need by then. But that is going to be it for this episode. Like if you like. Subscribe if you're not. Leave a comment if you have anything to say. I do read all the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.